Hello and welcome back to Focus Atlanta. Thank you so much for continuing to watch. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about your nutrition. I'm here with one of our favorite nutrition experts, Dr. Keith Kantor, and we're going to talk a little bit about how your nutrition can affect your addictions and or mental illness. Thank you so much for coming back on Focus Atlanta.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Dr. Kantor, the first time we chatted, we didn't really hit on this very much at all, but there is such a connection between what we put in our bodies and things like addiction or things like mental illness. Tell me a little bit about the background. I know, we can't get into it too deep, but there is a real connection between the ups and downs that go on in your brain if you are addicted to a substance, whether that's an illegal substance or cigarettes or alcohol, and food. Like
that's correct.
If it's a chocolate cupcake or if it's, something really sweet, the sugar kind of does the same thing in your brain.
Well, all of our urges come from, except for sex, come from opiate receptors, which we have in our body, which are in our brain, gastrointestinal tract, and our spinal cord.
Okay.
When they're stimulated, they release a chemical and it gives the body urges. The body really doesn't know what the urge is for. So after studying it, and it's been studied now for years and years, there's certain main foods that stimulate these opiate receptors besides drugs.
Wow.
Sugar, gluten, dairy products except for yogurt, sugar substitutes except for stevia, and a lot of the fake foods, preservatives and dyes that they put in food. All of these things stimulate the opiate receptors and tell the body that you have an urge. But if you're addicted to any of that, it tells you to have more of that, more of whatever you're addicted to.
Yeah.
So even if you go into an addiction center, right now in the United States, the rate of successful withdrawal from drugs is only 15%.
Wow.
Well, if you do both with what I call named program, that's the name of my company, stands for Nutritional Addiction Mitigation, Eating and Drinking. It about doubles it from the preliminary testing, which is still terrible. I mean, 70% of the people still aren't successful, but 30% is a lot better than 15, and the relapse rate, instead of being 85%, is only 70%. And we're still working on more methods to do it. And there's a lot of things that they do in these rehabilitation centers and addiction centers that are great. Talking to a therapist is great. Exercising is great. Eating better food and proper nutrition is great. All that's good, but if you just keep them away from drugs for 30 to 60 to 90 days, the way they usually do it in these centers, that's good. But if you could keep them away from drugs and not stimulate the opiate receptors, it's actually twice as good.
Wow.
And that's true with almost everything. You've heard from the CDC, which is out of Atlanta, of course, and probably the most respected medical body in the United States, that over 75 to 80% of all chronic disease is nutrition related. So how about giving them foods that have more serotonin and melatonin? It may not cure it, but at least they'll probably not need as much medicine. And you could do that with just about every chronic disease, but all the main mental illnesses. And it's a drastic difference.
Now, how can people learn more about this? Because, again, I told you, like, even when I saw the press release, like, the light bulb went off in my head. I was like, duh. Like, why hadn't I made that connection before, How can people learn more about just, curbing the things in their diet that might be exacerbating their addiction to whatever, or adding more into their diet that might help with their depression or their anxiety? Like, how can they learn what are the things that we need to be eating that are nutritionally acceptable for our bodies so that we just kind of balance these things out more naturally? Not that we're not going to need our therapist, we're not saying that, but it'll just help us to maybe get over the hump.
If they go to my website, which is called Named Program, N-A-M-E-D Program, they could go there. Everything's free. It's so exciting.
It is exciting
to know that you could help 30 million people that are addicted to drugs and another 30 million people that have some type of mental illness for very, very little money.
Wow. Just a little education, a little more knowledge.
And it's so exciting. I mean, you're just so fired up. It's that old, it's like being an Amway dealer.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that you came back on Focus Atlanta to share this with everyone.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I hope that everybody goes to the website and learns a little bit more. because again, we can share it with people we know. Because at this point, everybody knows somebody who's perhaps suffering with a mental illness, depression, anxiety, or perhaps who's suffering with an addiction, whether that's to alcohol or drugs. And so wouldn't it be nice to have just a little more education to learn how just nutrition could maybe make a difference, possibly make a difference? Maybe that's a little difference and maybe that's a lot, but you don't know until you learn. So learn a little bit more. When we know better, we do better. And stay tuned for more Focus Atlanta. We'll be right back.